From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. Early one morning, health correspondent for the Times, Poppy Koronka, came and sat down next to me in our studio and pulled out her phone.
So this is your Instagram?
It is. So I've just gone on my stories and you can see the first ad that's popped up is for medical weight loss is not cheating.
Oh.
A 25-day trial.
I mean, that's good to know. It's
good
not
to
cheating.
Know, good to know it's not cheating. We'll see if we can get any more.
How many of these are you getting a day?
Oh, God. It depends on the day, but probably anywhere between 5 and 10 on an average day. It's worth saying that I am at a healthy weight. I don't have any underlying health conditions. It's not something that I would be eligible for. So there we go. This one's a great one. So you can see the name of the pharmacy and the caption says, "Look after the pounds with the pharmacy." It's then got a picture of the quite distinctive Ozempic and semaglutide pen. It then says, "Safe and supported weight loss service." It's offering it for £139, reduced from £199.
It's a sale.
So it's a sale. It's quite a huge discount. And when you click on the caption, it says, "Look after the pounds with our transformative weight loss treatment with no unrealistic goals, just results-driven care, free 24-hour delivery. Find out if you're eligible and get started today."
It's been less than a year since weight loss jabs first became available in the UK. They've been hailed as a miracle drug for people who suffer from diabetes or obesity, but now they're increasingly being used by people who don't suffer from either, often with catastrophic effects. So how do we protect people when they're caught between a looks-obsessed society and a profit-driven industry?
The now Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said that he'd like to see much closer regulation of the medication, and he said he feared that one day someone's going to die from misusing these drugs.
The story today, the Ozempic pushers on social media.
Well, Poppy, I feel almost like we've glimpsed into your soul having gone through your Instagram already. I feel like I know you very well.
Isn't it? Yeah.
But when did you start seeing so many of these ads for weight loss?
Gosh, well, it was probably about 6 months ago that I saw the first advert, and I just sort of saw it pop up and I thought, that's a bit weird, and just sort of moved on. You know, I didn't really think too much of it. And then a couple of months later, I joined a couple of Facebook groups for diabetes support, weight loss support, sort of looking for people who had taken Ozempic and might have something to say. You know, maybe they've had some adverse experiences, maybe they bought some counterfeit stuff, just sort of looking to see what was going on. And then I scrolled through my Facebook afterwards, and it was really stark, the difference. It was suddenly almost every advert was for Ozempic or Wegovy from these pharmacies. And that then transferred over to Instagram, because they're obviously both Meta. And then it sort of just kept going, and I think I inadvertently trained my algorithm. I'm obviously a health journalist, so when I see something a little bit intriguing online that's health related, I obviously click on it. Meta does use machine learning on its adverts. So when you click on an advert, it says that's something that you're interested in. So obviously through clicking these adverts and trying to understand what was being shown to me, I told Meta inadvertently that that was something I was interested in, which professionally I am. It's sort of spiraled out of control in that I've already done this article and we just saw 6 or 7 adverts there in a couple of minutes. So it's still coming for me.
And you looked into this for a piece. I mean, how common a problem is this? How many of these ads are people sort of seeing?
So I had a snoop on Meta's ad library. So it's just sort of a platform where you can see all of the adverts that are on Meta. And when looking on their ad library, I looked for the active ingredient in Ozempic, so that's GLP-1, is often what these adverts will say in their sort of catchline. So when you search it, it comes up. I found approximately 6,100 adverts on their ad library mentioning GLP-1.
And so GLP-1, is that what you get in these injections?
So semaglutide, Wegovy, Ozempic, they're all GLP-1 agonists. So that's the class of drug that they are. They work by essentially suppressing the hormones that stimulate appetite. So they just dampen your appetite, and that's the mechanism by which they do it. They're all GLP-1 drugs. I also found more than 1,000 adverts mentioning weight loss injections between 2022 and the end of June. So yeah, it's really quite widespread. A lot of these adverts are now inactive, so they've been from 2022 until the current day. And some of them seem to maybe not be for these weight loss injections in particular, but using those search terms to sell a different weight loss product.
So this is sort of like a proxy for Ozempic.
Yeah.
But they're trying to find anyone who's looking for Ozempic.
Yes.
And sell them something else.
Yeah.
And when they're pitching, what do they tend to say?
A lot of them mention summer bodies. So that was the main sort of concerning thing that I found, was that quite a few adverts have had pictures of extremely thin women with get a summer body, or I think the one that I found was get summer ready. One of them said, want to shed a few pounds this summer. You know, if you're someone who's looking to lose 5 to 10 pounds, Ozempic is not for you. You're not a candidate for that drug.
And with so many things on social media, it's all about selling you a lifestyle.
Yes.
And a shortcut to it. Are these all pharmacies that are based here? Are they based abroad? You know, how legitimate are the people actually selling the drugs?
In terms of the actual ads for Ozempic, Wegovy, GLP-1 agonists themselves, a lot of those are pharmacies that are based in the UK. A lot of them are online pharmacies. And yeah, it's
big brands too.
Big brands and quite big online pharmacies. I mean, there's nothing in here to suggest that they are irresponsibly prescribing. More the issue is potentially advertising to target people who don't need this drug.
And is that allowed? I mean, is this legal? You know, it's especially when, having gone through your Instagram, you know, you can imagine the effect on most people, quite young, still impressionable, and every 5 minutes they are seeing 20 ads telling them this is a really quick way of losing weight.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you're a young woman who's been flirting with the idea of a quick fix in Ozempic, then your Instagram could well look like mine. You know, if you've been curious and clicked on a few of those ads, it could be a possibility that it could really look like that. It is prohibited to advertise any prescription-only medicine, so you're not allowed to the general public. So you're allowed to advertise to healthcare professionals, the general healthcare market, but you're not allowed to release adverts that are targeted towards the general public or that the general public could see.
So how is this happening? How is it getting through?
I think it's a pretty tough scene out there. I mean, there are thousands of these adverts on Meta's ad library. And the regulator for this is the Advertising Standards Authority and the Medicine and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, so the MHRA. And both of them have told me that you're not allowed to advertise prescription-only medicine. But I think part of the issue here is what they do when they find an advert that is contrary to these rules is they take it down. These adverts don't cost very much to put up on Facebook or Meta or Instagram. So you're in an environment where it might be more cost effective to just keep putting them up.
Right. So this is like whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
You take one down, 3 more appear.
Yeah.
But given that most of these are sort of big brand pharmacies, online pharmacies, if it's prohibited for them to be advertising to the general public about drugs, because it should be going through a healthcare professional, why aren't they being called out? Why isn't the Advertising Standards Agency going to the pharmacy itself and saying, you can't do this?
They do release sort of notices saying, cautionary notices, and, calling out these pharmacies that are in breach, and it sort of goes on their website saying, you've done it wrong, you shouldn't be doing this. This is, they put their rulings on their website. So there is that they'll be publicly called out. But I mean, how many people check?
Yeah.
And
it's not stopping them.
No. So it's a really, in my mind, it's a bit of a gaping hole in regulation. The ASA's regulations, they were, I guess, when advertising was in print and you'd spend hundreds of pounds on these adverts, taking the advert down would be a huge deterrent. But now we exist in this social media world, it's really, really hard to keep all of this in check. They've got a massive job. I think it's one of those areas that has changed so drastically with the internet. And I don't envy them having to go through the hundreds of ads I've given them. They are going through them.
But it seems so irresponsible for pharmacies to be told they're not supposed to be doing it and keep putting up new ads instead. And there's no comeback.
Yeah.
I mean, what was the response when you actually wrote about this? Because, as you say, most people don't go onto the Advertising Standards Agency's website to check who's misbehaved. But when you wrote about it, it was had a much more public reaction. How did the pharmacies react to that?
A lot of the pharmacies responded by saying that they were actually within the regulations. They said, we've spoken to the ASA and we believe our adverts are not in breach. I think it is worth saying that pharmacies can advertise that they can help with weight loss, but they're not allowed to draw any attention to prescription-only drugs.
But that's exactly what they seem to be doing. I mean,
with
I
the
saw
pictures of
the injection pen.
Yeah. So a lot of the adverts that the pharmacies I approached for a right of reply did have pictures of weight loss pens in their adverts and did have things saying, I think one of the most concerning sort of genre of ad that I found was talking about emotional eating, which is something that people with eating disorders experience. So that to me was quite concerning, marketing Ozempic or Wegovy as a potential fix for a mental health problem was really quite concerning to me. Beat had a lot to say about it.
This is a
eating disorder charity, yeah. And they said that pharmacies should be screening patients for eating disorders before prescribing anything to them.
Which is not what this is doing on Instagram.
No.
Did you try to buy any yourself, having received so many of these ads? I mean, did you try to sort of go through the process and see how easy it is to do?
I did actually get halfway through clicking on a quiz. One of them said, take our quiz to see if you can take...
There are quizzes?
There are quizzes.
Wow.
And then the idea being if you pass the quiz, then a prescriber will call you and see.
How we do diagnoses these days.
Yeah. So I got halfway through doing the quiz and then I thought, actually, I should probably get permission from the legal department here to do that. So I actually stopped halfway through the quiz. I did about 2 questions. I think I got about 5 or 6 emails from them saying, finish the quiz. You can get it tomorrow.
Keep going.
If you keep going on the quiz, which was quite funny. But no, never seriously. I didn't try and bite myself. I mean, we don't know how these drugs affect people who are of a healthy weight and take them.
And although you're seeing all of these ads and they seem to be sort of targeted at you and trying to encourage you to go through the quiz and get something prescribed, there's no evidence that the online pharmacies are actually prescribing the drugs to women who have seen the ads.
Yes, there's absolutely no suggestions here that these pharmacies are recklessly or irresponsibly prescribing. There's no evidence at the moment to say that they're prescribing to women who are of a healthy weight or just people who are of a healthy weight or are just handing it out willy-nilly. There's no evidence to say that. However, the Times and my colleague Ellena Hayward have exposed that it is possible to get hold of a prescription to these drugs, even if you are of a completely healthy weight.
Would you mind just introducing yourself to our listeners?
My name's Ellena Hayward and I am health editor at The Times.
So, Ellena, we've been talking to Poppy about sort of some of the online advertising around this and online pharmacies. I know you were very interested in how easy it is to get hold of Ozempic, not just having it advertised to you, but how easy it is to try and get hold of it and take it in this country. And you've actually been looking into some of the big high street brands, the places that most people will go into whenever they need a chemist, Boots and Superdrug. Tell us about that. I mean, firstly, what made you want to look into it?
So, as a health journalist, I've spent a lot of time covering Ozempic and weight loss injections over the past year, and mainly been focusing on the really positive impact they have for obesity and the promise they're showing in things like heart disease and kidney disease as well. And then a couple of weeks ago, I attended an NHS conference where A&E doctors started to warn about a phenomenon they were seeing of mainly young girls turning up in A&E who'd been buying these weight loss injections online. And none of the girls they were seeing in A&E were obese. And the doctor said the girls were basically lying about their weight to get hold of the injections. As some of them might have eating disorders and are sort of using it as a new way to starve themselves. And others are kind of using it to get beach body ready. That's how the NHS's top doctor put it.
So emergency dieting.
Yeah, so there's this concern that people don't really realise that the drug's a really powerful medication and are seeing it as maybe a quick fix before their summer holidays, something to take for a couple of months to slim down.
And these doctors that you were hearing from, I mean, what were they seeing when people present themselves in A&E who've been on Ozempic, who didn't really need to be? What sort of symptoms are they showing? What happens to them?
So it can have really dangerous and potentially deadly consequences. And the most serious is an inflammation of the pancreas. And this can be deadly. It can lead to inflammation around the whole body and actually need to intensive care.
Oh, wow.
And there's also other kind of complications, mainly around things like dehydration and nausea, and basically people not eating at all and going into a state of starvation, which can then cause levels of acid and salt in your blood to become altered, and that can in turn have knock-on effects. So doctors say that some of the women they've been seeing in A&E are really, really sick and they've become ill really quickly. And some of them also are kind of reluctant and a bit embarrassed to tell the A&E doctors what they've been taking because they know that technically they probably shouldn't have bought it online. And doctors said that, you know, it's taken for some of the patients quite a while for them to get to the bottom of what's causing these strange symptoms.
It's interesting that they're sort of embarrassed when they turn up. They don't even want to admit to what they've been doing. How have they been doing it? I mean, what's the process in this country? If you wanted to be prescribed Ozempic, how does it work? Do you need to go to a GP?
So the drugs have been made available on the NHS, but only for people who meet quite strict criteria. And that's if you're severely obese or have a body mass index over 35. But only a few thousand patients really are getting access to the drugs on the NHS because there's such a shortage of supply and huge capacity issues in the NHS. So as well as this NHS rollout, which really isn't reaching very many people, private pharmacies and private companies have got quite a lot of stock of Wegovy and of other weight loss injections. So Wegovy and Ozempic are actually the same drug. The drug's called semaglutide and it's manufactured by Novo Nordisk, which is this Danish firm that's made billions of pounds from the drug. The difference is that when it's approved to treat diabetes, it's called Ozempic. And when it's approved to treat obesity, it's called Wegovy. But because it became famous as Ozempic and it was used kind of off-label, and that's the one celebrities use a lot, then it tends to be just known as Ozempic. There's no actual difference in the drugs. So you can buy the weight loss injections privately, which has a lot fewer safeguards than the NHS system. So if you want to buy the drugs from an online pharmacy, you have to provide information on your weight to show that you meet the criteria to get prescribed it, which is that you're obese.
So this is what you try to do?
Yeah.
So talk me through that. So you log on, it's asking you for your weight. What do you say?
So on both Boots and Superdrug, they ask you to fill in details of your body mass index, which is your weight and your height. And I kind of Googled what my weight would have to be to put me into the obese threshold, which is a body mass index above 30. And I put my weight down as that. So I added about 3 stone to my real weight, but kept my height the same. It just wanted you to be above the threshold, and it kind of provided details of what your body mass index was so that you knew that you were then eligible. They go through a kind of brief health questionnaire to check you've not got any underlying health conditions. So I think I was asked about whether I had diabetes, whether I had mental health problems or any history of eating disorder. But it's quite a brief tick box kind of form. It took about 10 minutes to fill in. And obviously, if you're going to a private online pharmacy, then they've not got access to your medical records or your GP records. So you can, if you wanted to, lie and say you've not got any history of other health conditions, and there's no way for them to verify that or to check it. Both Boots and Superdrug ask for a photo of your body. So I just wore some pretty baggy clothes. And Superdrug actually had an extra layer to Boots. So Superdrug also asked for a picture of the scales with your feet on them. But again, I just put on a backpack with some heavy books in.
I was going to say, you could just have weights in your pockets.
Exactly.
How long did this whole process take? I mean, if you decide to look into it, you start Googling, you're online. How soon can you be collecting the Ozempic?
So I made an account with the Boots online doctor trying to get hold of Wegovy on the Thursday. And within 24 hours, I'd been issued with the prescription online.
Wow.
And then a couple of days after that, it was ready for me to collect from my local Boots pharmacy. Superdrug took a little bit longer, but the whole process was less than a week from start to finish.
And how much are you paying in order to pick these up?
So the Boots one cost £199 for a month's supply, and Superdrug was £195.
And when it comes to collection day, you get the email, your prescription is ready. I mean, when you walk in, are you worried that they're going to look at you and think, you shouldn't be having this? I mean, did you put on a few layers?
I just wore my normal clothes, but
Really?
again, quite a baggy jumper. But yeah, I was nervous because it felt a bit like I was going undercover or something, which I suppose I was. I was a bit shocked because it's such a powerful drug. And it was just handed to me over the counter. I just gave my name, my address, and the pharmacist didn't really look me up and down. I mean, that's not their job. Their job is just to hand it over.
But there's no extra check there.
No, there was absolutely no checks at all. I was just handed it straight over the pharmacy counter, and I'd paid online, so I didn't even need to sort of hand over my credit card or anything at the till. And I was thinking, kind of when I was reflecting on it all, that this would seem to be a pretty perfect, opportune moment to do in-person checks on people collecting weight loss injections, just to verify that what they say online is true. It's not the sort of thing that doctors warn about lightly. And they'd really said that this is a trend they're seeing and they're really concerned about it. And when I decided to put the system to the test, I in no way thought that within a few days I'd have prescriptions from both Boots and Superdrug. And I was really shocked by how easy it all was and how now I have 2 injections for a very powerful medication
What are
that
you
I
going
shouldn't
to
have
do
been
with them?
prescribed. Well, I have to dispose of them as part of my kind of conditions for getting hold of it with our legal team. And also, I'd be a bit nervous about even trying to take it.
You wrote this up. It went out in the Times. There was a big reaction. Tell us about that.
So there were calls from the NHS and from the Labour Party for much closer regulation of how the drugs are prescribed online. Professor Sir Stephen Powis, who's the NHS's top doctor, said he'd like to see in-person checks of anyone getting hold of weight loss injections, just to things like weighing people when they come to collect it. The now Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said that he'd like to see much closer regulation of the medication. And he said he feared that one day someone's going to die from misusing these drugs like Wegovy and Ozempic without sort of action to clamp down on online pharmacies.
I mean, those are really strong words, and you sort of have to assume that that will be part of the agenda now. What about the chemists themselves?
So Boots responded by saying they'd actually implement an extra layer of checks and ask people to submit a couple more photos when they apply for the drugs online. They want 2 additional photographs of people wearing tight-fitting clothing, but still no in-person checks. And Superdrug also said they've got good safeguarding protocols in place, and they both said that they rely on people to be honest and when completing the forms. And obviously when I completed the forms, I wasn't honest. I think the problem is that when there's evidence that people are lying about their weight to get hold of the drug inappropriately, then you'd expect the pharmacies to kind of respond to that and to take steps to ensure people can't lie.
Were you surprised by their response? I mean, you explained how when you went in, it would have been so simple for them to do a few of those checks in person, and yet they haven't even signed up to that. Do you sort of feel like those loopholes still exist?
Yeah, and I think it's also, it seems to me like a bit of a no-brainer of a medication where you should have in-person checks for. But this does seem to be a bit of a free-for-all, really, in that you can get it from a huge range of sources, and you kind of want one pharmacy maybe to take the lead and to set the example of performing in-person checks and then hope that the other pharmacies would follow.
And Ellena, given that that hasn't happened yet, I mean, how worried do you think we should be? I mean, obviously, there are huge advantages to Ozempic, Wegovy, when they're helping people with diabetes or clinical obesity. For people who are still able to get hold of it while they are actually a healthy weight, how dangerous is that, and how worried should we be about it?
Yeah, I think we should be really worried. I think this isn't a theoretical problem where I've just decided to test it and see if it's possible. It's very clear from the doctors I've spoke to that this is something that's happening pretty much every day around the country. One A&E doctor I spoke to who's based in Liverpool says that every shift now, when she goes in, she sees a patient, usually a young woman, who've bought the weight loss drugs online despite not being obese at all. And she said she really fears there's going to be a death unless there's action to stop it. When you look at the history of eating disorders and history of how medications can be abused easily by people struggling with body image, and also the pressure on everyone now to be thin and to try and fit these body ideals, then when you've got a drug that's being presented as a quick fix and is being bombarded at people on social media, then it's not surprising that people are wanting to get hold of it and are kind of abusing the system to get hold of it. And I think it's really important that the patients turning up at A&E who've lied about their weight aren't blamed and aren't sort of criticised for being silly and being irresponsible. I think the responsibility here is really on the pharmacies and the people selling the drugs to make sure that there aren't these loopholes that allow people to get hold of medication that's extraordinarily powerful and can be really deadly and dangerous if it's in the wrong hands.
That was Ellena Haywood, and earlier you heard from another of our health reporters, Poppy Koronka. You can find all of their investigations around Wegovy and Ozempic online at thetimes.com. Production and sound design for this episode were done by Taryn Siegel. The executive producer is Kate Ford. And if you're struggling with weight loss, please consult your doctor and not Instagram. And if you think you might be struggling with an eating disorder, the charity BEAT, B-E-A-T, which we mentioned earlier, is a really good resource. We've put a link to it in the description of this episode. Thanks for listening. See you again soon.